All right. Hello and welcome once again to White Lotus of Light. We're doing a special debate day stream here on this. It'll actually be going up on Tuesday, September 10th. And this looks like this could be quite the eventful week. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about some of these incredible polls that have been coming out, how the Democrats are trying to distract from that. And we're also going to be talking about some really interesting astrology and how this week, for a variety of reasons, there could be a major event most likely after the debate. And it seems like Friday is a very likely day, which I'm going to get into. There's reasons numerology-wise, there's reasons history-wise, there's reasons secret society wise. It all comes down to the shadow war between the Luciferians and the Molochians. I talk about a lot in this channel, and some things that are going on astrologically. And so before I jump into all that, and it's really fascinating, especially the astrology piece, as well as the history of Friday the 13th and why it might matter this Friday. I just want to take a quick second to say that I am starting next week, the 18th of September. I'm going to be doing a Vedic astrology course. And if you're interested, you can go to whitelotusoflight.com courses and then sign up for the Vedic astrology course. Vedic astrology is amazing because you can use it to find the karmas that will be unfolding in your life professionally in regards to relationship. Vedic astrology has completely changed my life, and it's a big part of why I've gone from having a very difficult, rather mediocre life to harnessing the power of my chart in order to have a much, much, much better, more self-empowered, more peaceful, harmonious, and happy life. And so that's something you can learn by taking the Vedic astrology course for beginners. Also, there is a Angelic magic course for that begins the 19th. And both of these courses are for adult learners. And so with the exception of 3 of the Angelic magic classes, all these classes can be done and self-study however adults want. I also want to say that for me, Angelic Magic has been one of the most transformative and incredible journeys in my entire life. It's completely transformed my life into just an ongoing series of miracles, and I feel really, really fortunate to have found Angelic Magic and to have the connection I now have with the angelic realms, which comes up later in this episode. So for those who are interested in hearing the call for either of these, I want you to know that I don't want money to be a barrier for you, and we're offering the Sacred Support Program, and you can go to whitelotusoflight.com and click on Sacred Support Program, and you can get either an installment payment plan or even a greatly reduced rate by filling out that form. And then if you're selected, we'll be able to offer those things to you. And so for those who are able to pay the full price, fantastic. You help those other learners to be subsidized. Okay, without further ado, I am going to go ahead and share this live stream. Or rather, well, I guess it will not be a live stream, but this amazing bit of information. So one of the first things I want to talk about that is very puzzling if you pay attention to XRP and the way I discuss it on the channel, and the fact that it seems to be the absolute key piece to the Luciferian financial system that's blockchain based that'll be coming out in 2025. I often talk about how XRP and Ripple will be at the very center, along with XLM stellar lumens and all the iconography around that, all the steganography, all the esoteric symbolism that's involved with both of those. I talk about that a lot in this channel. And so something very, very interesting is earlier this year, Chris Larsen's XRP wallet was hacked for an estimated 112 million. Now, they were able to keep it from whatever this hack was from spreading to anywhere else in Ripple, but there was unauthorized account access to a few of his accounts. They found it right away, and they notified exchanges to freeze the affected addresses, and law enforcement is already involved. I'm not sure whether they had the clawback mechanism at this point. They may have even used this as fuel for why they needed to have the clawback system in place, which is something that's an absolute requirement of banks. That's where when you discover fraud in a transaction, you're able to, through certain channels, be able to claw back a transaction. And it's something that banks and financial institutions absolutely require. in order for XRP and the blockchain system to be utilized at scale, it has to have that function. And so this year, that function's been voted on and passed into and put into the code of the XRP ledger. Now, why am I bringing up Chris Larsen and his XRP hack? Well, something very odd happened in the last few days. We're going to get into some of the insane endorsements or pseudo endorsements that Trump has gotten this week. But one that went to Kamala that I did not expect, but I then understood after thinking about it a while, why this would have happened was Chris Larsen was among these 88 people who endorsed Kamala Harris, which is absolutely wild because the Biden White House has been super, super, super aggressive against crypto. And it's been during the Biden administration, I believe, that the Ripple lawsuit began. I want to say it began in 2021. Regardless, Gary Gensler, the SEC chairman that was appointed by Biden, has been going after all manner of different cryptocurrencies, some of which it makes a lot of sense to go after them, and some of which it just looks sort of like a shakedown or some kind of power play or flex. We're trying to get accommodations. For example, the Coinbase lawsuit. There's been just quite a few that have been really eyebrow raisers. And meanwhile, they let fraud like FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, which was obvious fraud to anyone who scratched the surface, certainly anything a regulator could have done. And Sam Bankman-Fried repeatedly met with Gary Gensler and has a lot of connections to him. So why in the hell would Chris Larsen, founder of Ripple, want to endorse Kamala for president? Well, first of all, I want to point out, I noticed David Schwartz and also Brad Garlinghouse, as far as I know, have not endorsed anyone. But what I realized was that if you're trying to cozy up to and get the Molochians to drop their guard, you're going to need to seem to back their candidate. You can always work with Trump on the back end. And in fact, I think likely they communicated with the Trump campaign beforehand and told them that this was going to happen and that they were doing it as part of the overarching Luciferian strategy in order to get Trump in there and to get the system into place. And I do think there is actual organization that's happening between a group that probably would not call themselves Luciferian, but that's the, what I call them. And there's some amount of evidence that various members among the more famous Luciferians, for example, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, seem to have real occult ties to actual Luciferianism. And so I just thought that this was noteworthy and something to keep an eye on. Why would Ripple do that, right? Especially given that everything else that's happened this week. Again, I think it's so the Molochians don't panic and get rid of Ripple and XRP at the center and maybe even go easy on them and maybe even cut a deal with them. And the sooner that financial system goes live, the sooner the Luciferians completely turn the corner on the Molochians. Are you seeking a deeper connection to the divine, along with a personal journey of transformation? Welcome to Angelic Magic Classes with White Lotus of Light, where the light of the angels guides you through the realms of spirit, the integration of your shadow, healing of trauma, bringing harmony, abundance, and purpose into your life. In our Angelic Magic Classes, you will explore the profound relationship between divine energies and personal growth. By connecting with the celestial angelic realms, you uncover a path to greater happiness, a stronger sense of purpose, and a life filled with abundance of all kinds, from material financial prosperity to an abundance of love and joy in your day-to-day life. Under the guidance of Ian Ferguson and our experienced angelic magic practitioners, you will learn the ancient art of theurgic angelic magic. Explore the metaphysics of magic, the hermetic principles that govern the laws of our universe, sacred rituals, divine invocations, and powerful spells that have been passed down through the ages. Our classes help you align with your higher self, unlocking the key to a more fulfilling life through personal transformation. Discover the divine light within, connect with angelic celestial beings, and navigate and transform the shadows of your internal psyche that hold you back from fulfilling your true divine purpose and mastery of your own life experience. Our course is designed to bring you peace, happiness, and abundance in all areas of your life. Don't miss this opportunity to transform your life with angelic magic and start your journey towards spiritual awakening, personal fulfillment, and a newfound prosperity and joy in your day-to-day life. It is time once again for those who feel the call to pick up the arms and armor of the Most High God and become divine protectors of humanity and join the ranks of the co-creators of this earth realm, that we might bring about a more peaceful, harmonious, and loving planet. So what else has happened this week? Well, as you could see in the thumbnail, I expect this will be going out before the debate. I would be shocked and astonished unless there was some, again, four-dimensional chess, Luciferian gambit in it. I would be shocked at anything short of a complete mopping of the floor by Trump on Kamala Harris tonight. I would be astonished if anything else happened. And so the reports are coming in that Kamala Harris is secluded there in her hotel in Pittsburgh on a fake stage with a Trump impersonator, right? Presumably not the comedian pictured here, who is being really aggressive towards her and whatever, because they're trying to prep her. They did almost the exact same thing with Biden. And of course, that ended in unmitigated disaster. And what I think is happening is I think that this is one last Hail Mary to try and get a little bit of momentum for the Molochians before they really start pulling out the really crazy stops. And I think that if this debate goes the direction it sure seems like it's going to go, with Trump annihilating Kamala, that's going to add fuel to the fire of desperation from the Molochians, and they're going to have a real strong desire to erase the memory of that debate with a mega event right away. And I think Friday might be the day. So now take a look at this. This is just insane. So this is Nate Silver of 538, and he's now saying that there's a 63.8% chance that Trump will defeat Harris. Right, with Trump getting 63.8% versus Harris's 36. That's incredible. And then the swing states, this is where you get down to the nitty gritty. You got Trump winning 64-36 in Pennsylvania. If that's true, if he's truly up by 28 points in Pennsylvania, it's over. Like it's over. It's over. Harris has to win Pennsylvania to be able to win the Electoral College. So I almost don't even need to read the rest of these stats. But let's go ahead and read them anyway. Look at Michigan, 54-46 Trump, 8-point lead. That's insane. Wisconsin, 6-point lead. That's a lot smaller, but that's still a very substantial lead. And this is way, way, way beyond the polling that Trump had in 2020. In 2016. It's insane. North Carolina, Trump, 75-25. And Georgia goes on to say like some similar 60-40 type of scenario. So this is what it seems based on the electoral votes that he's going to just absolutely obliterate Harris. And it will be because of the Electoral College. Harris may very well win the popular vote, although I doubt it. But there's basically no chance that she can beat Trump based on this polling. And it just goes on and on. So the New York Times poll gender gap 2024 versus 2020, 2020 versus 2024. In 2020, among men, they were tied at 45%. And among women, Biden was up 16 points, which is a lot. So among men now, Trump has a 16-point lead. That's insane. And among women, Harris only has a 10-point lead. That means Harris has lost 6 points with women. With women. And Trump is just absolutely crushing among men. Whoops. So Harris is running behind Biden among women, and Trump is doing 16 better among men. Massive erosion for Harris. It's just started. It's just started, and this debate is going to just turn it into a waterfall for Harris. So as Michael Tracy says, it's pretty wild. Per the new New York Times Siena poll, the demographic that identifies most as Democrats is voters age 65 plus, and the demographic that identifies least as Democrats is voters aged 18 to 29. Incredible. The winds of change. Whoa. That's amazing. Only 22% of voters 18 to 29 identify as Democrat. 26% identify as Republican, and 40% identify as independent. And if you identify as independent, guess what? 75% of them or something nutty is going to go to Trump. It's going to be just a complete landslide among independents, because the only thing that gets people to vote for Harris is Orange Man bad. That's it. What policy? Oh, they finally put up a policy page. Oh, I'm sure it's so rich and robust. Why would you even bother and look when they haven't had it up for 56 days? They didn't have a platform at the DNC. How do you not have a platform at the Democratic National Committee or the Republican National Committee? Trump endlessly elaborates on his platform and gets granular and specific. This woman can't string together a sentence. I watched this Hitler parodies thing where Hitler called her up on the phone. You know, it's that from that movie Downfall. And she just talks in her normal word salad way. And he's like, eventually Hitler flips out on her and says he's going insane, you know, just even trying to listen to her, and that she's worse than Biden, which both is just true. Biden would have his like mini strokes or clone malfunctions and go off script and sound nutty and stupid, but nothing like Harris, who's bringing a very natural stupidity that she has honed and polished. So this is the new general election poll, age 18 to 30. Harris is beating Trump by 8 points, which is wild, but I also don't think that's going to hold, especially like with college underway and people are going to be talking and young people are going to be talking. And since they don't identify as Democratic, they have no real reason to vote for Harris other than they're getting pressure from others. But there's this building swing in the pendulum across young people all across the world in favor of nationalism and conservatism. So anyway, slice it, she's down a disastrous 16 points. 2/3 of the cushion that Biden enjoyed in that age group. And of course, you know, those numbers might be a bit massaged there in 2020, right? So Donald Trump is outperforming 2016 and 2020 in the US or in the Midwest. He's doing he's plus 11 in the Midwest in 2024 compared to 2.1 plus 2.1 in 2020 and plus 4.3 in 2016. He's almost 3 times better than 2016. It's wild. I mean, like if you look, like Trump's winning, Trump's barely winning, and Trump's obliterated. I mean, these are insane numbers. New York Times poll, Biden 2020 versus Harris 2024. Biden 2020 among Hispanics, Biden plus 28. Among blacks, Biden plus 74, right? Questionable, that one especially. Harris 2024, among Hispanics, she's got a 12-point lead. She's lost more than half already. She's only been candidate for 56 days. She's already down 16 points from where Biden was. And among blacks, she's down 12 points. There's no way these numbers are right, by the way. There's no way only 13% of black people are voting for Trump. I don't buy that at all. I do not buy that at all. I saw this hilarious thing where this black guy posted underneath some black conservative. He said, Trump is blacker than Obama. He's been shot at. He's got felonies. He's got a mugshot. He's got all these baby mamas. Like they went on this whole list and they're like, Like Trump is straight up blacker than Obama, which is one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen. But actually, in 2020, Biden was blacker than Obama because he did better in Wisconsin and Michigan. He said, knowing that that was completely legitimate, he did better in Wisconsin and Michigan in the black voting districts than Obama did. Just let that sink in and ask yourself, does that make a lot of sense? Right? So New York Times 2020, Trump had +7 among white people. He now has +14. So he's more than double the support among whites versus 2020. And this is huge, is 67 to 70% of the electorate will be white. And I mean, like, that's where the really big numbers are possible. I also don't believe for a minute this poll over here to the left is accurate. Hispanics in particular are coming over to Trump because they're very culturally conservative, or like socially conservative, right? And they've seen the way the Democrats have been absolutely wackadoodle under Biden. There's no way these numbers are accurate, especially among blacks. There's no way he's only getting 13% of American blacks. Not a chance. I don't buy that for a minute. So voters overwhelmingly see Harris as more of the same, while they see Trump as a major change. 55% of voters say Harris bears some or a lot of the blame for rising prices. And this is what's called a change election, right? And they've actually had, the last 3 elections have been change elections. People really want change. They really don't like the direction the country has ended up. And what a shock after 16 years of Bush and Obama. And speaking of Bush and Obama, Harris didn't just get a Chris Larsen endorsement. She also got an endorsement from Liz. That would be bad enough. An actual war criminal, Dick Cheney. And the Democrats are like, yeah, this is our candidate. We love that. And I guarantee, like, I haven't heard that George W. Bush endorsed Harris, but I'm sure he will. Of course he will. And Karl Rove is out there basically stumping for Harris. Like, knock, knock. Hello, Democrats? Do you have a conscience at all, or a memory? You're not a little concerned that you're on the same side as Karl frickin' Rove and George W. Bush and Dick frickin' Cheney, Darth Cheney himself? First of all, how the hell is that guy still alive? Like, let's just take a pause right there. Time out. Quick question. How the fuck is Dick Cheney still alive? Well, heaven doesn't want him, and Satan doesn't want the competition. So Cheney might outlive us all. Like, I hate to tell you, Keith Richards, but there's new competition for someone who just won't die. Like, Rumsfeld supposedly, and I don't buy it, died in 2021, but Dick Cheney's still with us? Rumsfeld looked like every night he did, like, you know, double clap push-ups. You know what I'm saying? Like, Rumsfeld looked in amazing shape in the early 2000s. And, you know, Dick Cheney looked like he was been on death's door since at least the other H.W. Bush administration, when he was also in that one, right? Like, that guy just looks terrible. And meanwhile, Rumsfeld is dead. Anyways, that's just an aside. But I cannot believe that the Democrats are against the candidate, against RFK Jr. and his endorsement, and are pro the Cheney candidate. Like, really, guys? Like, I shouldn't even have to explain why that's a thing. So right now they have Trump barely winning the popular vote by about 1% based on this poll. But his electoral college win probability is a razor thin 99.7%. We need Hulk Hogan to come out again and read this poll number and tear off the shirt to reveal the poll number. So this is crazy. Like, basically, like, Trump just has in the bag, and they haven't even done the debate yet, bro. And do you really think Kamala word salad able to see the future unburdened by the past? I'm able to mindlessly walk in a random direction, unburdened by common sense and any concept of what has happened before, lest I use that to learn. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. There's like some 15-minute supercut of Kamala Harris just saying that. I miss I'm not correctly, which is amazing because it should be burned into my brain however many times I've seen it. But this whole thing where she's like, you can imagine a future unburdened by the past. Just over and over again, she says some variation on that. Like it's the most profound thing anyone's ever heard. Her ability to say nothing with trillions of words and literally sound like she thinks that she sounds smart is just astonishing. And so do you really think that that versus like meme king, freaking quick takedown, comeback Trump? No. Jeb Bush was a far more competent debater than Kamala Harris. And let that sink in. And remember what Trump did to Jeb Bush in 2016? I cannot wait to see this. There's going to be definite viral moments and all of them Trump. All right, so then on the betting markets, we have this particular one, and there's many of them. And these are both, you know, really worth looking at because people are putting their money where the mouth is. And so therefore, it's usually these kind of markets are more accurate than polls because people have skin in the game, right? But you should take it with a grain of salt that these numbers can very easily be manipulated with just straight up money. Like kind of more easy than a poll. You just literally pour money into these sites and you can manipulate these. Nonetheless, a 10-point lead that Trump's going to win Pennsylvania. Like, bro, again, if Trump wins Pennsylvania, pack your bags, Kamala. Just kidding. We need the size of an orange jumpsuit. You know, like, there's no way. There's no way. And so that brings me to, whoops, and darn it, this thing that I put in is off center. But there was a book written back in 1907 called Friday the 13th by Thomas William Lawson. And it was about a stock operator who was, that was the word for stockbroker essentially back then. But it was basically a very wealthy guy who wanted revenge. And so he was going to crash the markets on Friday the 13th. And why Friday the 13th? Well, because there's a very long history around it that's very important. And I'm just going to go through a couple things here real quick because I need to refer to my notes. And here's what I was going to say. So I want to elaborate on the astrology of last week and add that this Friday the 13th, there is a chance, it's not a certainty, but there's a pretty good chance for astrological, symbolic, esoteric, and other reasons that there could be a major event. In addition to the fact that the Democrats are going to be desperate to cover up the stench of Kamala's certain to be disastrous debate performance later tonight. So I wanted to elaborate on the astrology of last week and add that this Friday may have a large event happen. There's two reasons for this, astrologically speaking. And one of them is that, or excuse me, one of them is astrological and one of them is the symbolic and historical nature of Friday the 13th. But we've recently seen Uranus go retrograde. And that began on September 1st. Very interesting. The exact same day that Pluto retrograded into Capricorn. Pluto had been retrograde for a while, but it's now gone back into Capricorn. Its last period of time in Capricorn for about almost 250 years. For another 248 years, Pluto will never go in Capricorn again. And huge transformation, again, around power structures, but also what appears to be a last gasp by the Molochians where they have all the power, or so they think, right? So Uranus went retrograde September 1st and is now moving towards the exact conjunction at 2630 Taurus. So it was moving away from it. And why does that matter? Well, at 2630 Taurus is where the fixed star algo, the left eye of Medusa, and I talk about this a lot in the astrology, where I did an astrology chart for what I thought would be a major event coming. And it turned out the next day, there was the assassination attempt on Trump. And I pointed out that there was this fixed star, and that the fixed star Algo is considered the most evil star in the zodiac. And you have Uranus, the planet which is sudden shocking change, going retrograde and moving towards it again. And is now within 1 degree. And instead of 1 degree and separating, which really matters, direction in astrology matters tremendously. So a going back over of themes of what has happened before, a sudden shocking and ending up failing event, right? But a sudden shocking attempt at a huge power move happened when Uranus was conjunct Algo at 2630. And Uranus was then now moving away from it, but now has gone retrograde at the same time that Pluto has just gone on to Capricorn, which it was not last time. So there could also be an event, unlikely to be the same thing, right? Like them trying to go after Trump that way again, it could happen. I don't think so. I think that's too obvious. I think they're going to have to use other means. And, you know, the Fed interest rate meeting is coming up on the 18th, I believe it is. And so one thing that would really help unleash the Fed and the money printer at the Fed is if there was a stock market crash, just like that book from 1907. And in fact, there was a crash on Friday the 13th in 1989. There was a mini crash that was based on a airline merger being blocked. So while it's not going to be exactly conjunct on the 13th, it's getting quite close. And I note that July 13th was the date in which the last assassination attempt happened on him. And so 13 is often used, as are a variety of other numbers. And it's also a couple of days after 9/11, which is also the numerology sum of Trump's new 45-47 hat, which I also covered. And the September 11th is this very important astrological energetic gateway. It's one of these 4 quadrants of the years where huge amounts of energy comes through. And that's why it's a date where you've had things like Allende getting assassinated in Chile, and of course, 9/11 most famously. And that's something that Trump has been talking out about literally since 9/11, 2001. He was on there saying, boy, that sure reminds me of buildings being demolished, and I think we need to do a thorough investigation there. So while Uranus won't actually get there until mid to late October, and at that point, I think there's a very high likelihood of an event, this Friday looks very interesting to me based on this astrology. The other thing that is super important about this Friday is that it's Friday the 13th, and that has a huge significance for both the Luciferians and the Molochians, and it's a particularly horrific day for the former, right? For the Luciferians, it's a horrifying day, which I'm going to explain in a second. And for the latter, it's been used repeatedly in history to do really horrific things. There's been a lot of horrific things that have happened on Friday the 13th. So most notoriously, on October 13th, 1307, the Knights Templar were suppressed. The Knights Templar were an organization that was very unusual for its time, because it had all 3 levels of consciousness I talk about on this channel. It had Molochian consciousness, especially once it got large enough and was international in scope. Some of the banking practices that they did and that they revived and brought from the Middle East were like quite devastating and were used quite ruthlessly. And some of the other just sort of cartel practices as an international, basically corporate entity of medieval times, there was definite power abuse. And even Timothy Hogan, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, will discuss that. However, what was exceedingly rare in that era was that there was also a lot of Luciferian consciousness, and at the core, a lot of Most High consciousness that was seeking out the primordial tradition from Atlantis. And so there was, the outer layer was Molochian, and inner layer was Luciferian, and at the very core, it is my firm belief that there was Most High consciousness. So the Knights Templar, having those 3 levels of consciousness, it's hard to overstate how exceedingly rare that was in an era when Molochian consciousness reigned supreme. 1300s Europe, pretty dark, pretty low consciousness. So the Knights Templar were responsible for taking Europe out of the Dark Ages with teachings that they brought back from the Near East and seeding the Renaissance and later the Enlightenment and the U.S. Revolutionary War and the signing of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, all of which were done by Templar or Templar-related organizations. For example, Thomas Jefferson was one of the main architects of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, one of the main authors, and he was a Templar, according to Timothy Hogan. The Templar continued even after the suppression, in part by fleeing to Portugal and to the British Isles, and in particular Scotland. And they would later reemerge in a new form known as the Masons. And over time, yes, the Masons had that same issue, right? There's like the P2 Lodge in Italy, which even almost all Masons will agree was a clear example of Molochian consciousness. Very nasty, involved in terrible things, assassinations, bribery, all this kind of bad stuff. And so you see that pattern repeat again, although I would say that Masonry is far darker, in my estimation, and I'm not a Mason, but I am a Templar, than Templarism. Templarism is a much higher vibration. And so the Molochians, it seems, during the suppression of the Templar, which was very famous for, they then burned Jacques de Molay at the stake, also on a Friday the 13th. And they did that because that kind of torturing someone to death can disrupt this spiritual technique known as perfecting the solar body. And when you perfect the solar body, which is one of the most difficult and closely guarded secrets of the Western esoteric tradition, and there's scant information about, well, scant information isn't true. I should say the method that the Egyptians, because it seems to be Egyptian magic and character, that seems to have come from the last Bronze Age or Dwapara Yuga, the descending Yuga, but that is where the oldest records of this are, this perfecting of the solar body. According to esoteric tradition, it comes from basically what would have been the last Bronze Age, so about 6,000 years ago, this technique. And what it does is it allows you to carry over a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and to some degree sense of self from prior incarnations. It allows you to incarnate conscious of who and what you are as a soul. Whereas most, when they die and then are reborn, when they die, they go through and they remember everything. And then when they reincarnate, they forget everything. This is the experience most souls have. Perfecting the solar body allows you to remember who and what you are through multiple incarnations, which is, it's hard to overstate how powerful that is. There's similar things with perfecting a lunar body, and there's other techniques and so forth out there. It seems the solar body is only achievable by people at higher levels of vibration. The lunar body and other sort of similar techniques that the Molochians have also figured out how to use, those can be done with lower consciousness, but there's certain very significant flaws in it that tends to be corrupting and make a soul darker over time. So by burning the Knights Templar, the stake, when you drown, burn at the stake, or torture someone to death, all three of which were used massively during the Inquisition, the Albigensian Crusade, right? The suppression of the pagan wise women, right? The witches were often burned at the stake. Anyone caught who was a sorcerer using magic or astrology or divination were very often burned at the stake at various points in medieval times. And that wasn't an accident. Those techniques of drowning and burning, right? Like, why not just chop off their head? Do you ever think about that? Why not hang them? Why chop up? The vast majority of killing throughout history, right, for execution is hanging or chopping off head. And then in modern times, there's been other techniques, right? Poison gas, injection, electrocution, right? But in ancient times, it was the headsman and the headsman's axe. That's how you execute someone. Not people who have spiritual abilities. People who had spiritual abilities, they would burn at the stake or drown or torture to death. Why? Because the Molochians figured out that this disrupts the solar body, and it takes dozens of incarnations for those who died that way to be able to reform their solar bodies, unless their soul stumbles across that information again and does certain things to bring it back together. So I will add that it is an educated guess and an intuitive belief and based on astrology that I think something will happen this Friday. Now, I want to be careful how I phrase this because they have not said this will happen, but when this date was brought to my attention was because it's a very significant date for me astrologically because of Vedic astrology. And I'm not going to get into why, but it's a huge temporal marker for me personally. And when I was doing my seraphim ritual this week, the angel said it would be a huge day for me and a huge day for the world, and that there would be a huge energetic shift that would occur on Friday and that would have massive impacts on the planet. And they said this may or may not result in a major event. But when I think of all these elements, you have the debate this week. It's a Friday the 13th. You have this Uranus retrograding towards Algo and within 1 degree now. You have Pluto retrograding into Capricorn. When I see all those things lined up and the fact that the angels have been saying for months, mid-September, you know, that is kind of the latest when things will pop off is mid to late September, right? That's what they've been saying for months, that that's the absolute outer limit of when things would start really going nuts. I think that there's a very real chance that something significant happens this Friday. If it does not, then it's just a matter of the next couple of weeks. But I kind of had this date circled on my calendar based on that conversation with the angels. And then thinking about it with the debate tonight, I had to look at the astrology, and I think there's some very interesting things. There's also a planet I was going to talk about, but I didn't really get into it. But there's a very interestingly named asteroid, Orcus. It's a trans-Neptunian dwarf planet, essentially. It's only been discovered in the past 20 years. But the thing is that one of the things I found fascinating about Western astrology is this notion of the use of asteroids. I dismissed it initially until it was proven to me that it's 100% a thing because of the asteroid Chiron. That one is unmistakable, and anyone who understands what Chiron the Wounded Centaur symbolizes and looks at where it is in their chart and thinks about it will be like, wow. And it's basically where your deepest wound is and where things around basically what your soul needs to learn and heal from in this lifetime, those themes are going to come up. You know, people will see it in their 10th house and they struggle with their career. In their 7th house, they struggle with relationships. In their 5th house, they struggle around children. 2nd house, income and household harmony. If they have it in their 1st house, it's their very sense of self is in question. You know, it's different. It depends on the sign and all these kind of things. Those are just kind of broad strokes. But Chiron got me starting to pay attention, and I've started to wonder if perhaps literally all these significant bodies within our solar system actually do delineate as though they're this hyper complicated clock events that really matter, because certainly the fixed stars, the planets, they all have a massive impact. And in the case of the lunar mansions and the planets and the fixed stars, those are all proven beyond a shadow of a doubt for me. And again, some asteroids seem to definitely work. And so there's this other asteroid named Orcus, and it's at direct opposition to Saturn. And what Orcus does is to review, which is also what retrogrades do, retrograde Pluto, retrograde Uranus. It's to review events and find ways of spiritual growth by looking at events and understanding exactly why this usually very negative event impacted you in a certain way and how to move forward from there, and or triggers events that cause this. When Neptune and Orcus were in opposition to one another, things from the death of David Bowie to quite a lot of other famous people who were sort of iconoclasts, a lot of them died during that period of time. It was like a 5-year transit or something like that. But I noticed that this planet Orcus, which is named after an Italian demon, actually, was in opposition to Saturn. And it caught my eye and my intuition sparked. And I said, there's something to this. And that is also happening this Friday. So there's a tremendous amount of powerful astrological influences that are coming into play these next few weeks. and basically into the first 2 weeks of October. And there's going to be some very positive things happening. Mercury is going to be going into Virgo very shortly, and Venus is going to be going out of its sign of debilitation, Virgo, and into Libra, which is very positive. And so I think that you'll be seeing a real mix of super negative, depressing, awful events, and then really hopeful things happening. For example, I want to end on something hopeful. There were massive protests in Brazil over getting rid of X, and now Rumble has also been kicked out of Brazil. And there were massive protests that were led by former President Bolsonaro, who is definitely a Luciferian and is definitely part of this clique of nationalists who are rising and pushing back against this globalist thing, all of whom, interestingly, have ties to Zionists in Israel, which is odd. That is one of the things that I find the most puzzling about the shadow war between the Luciferians and the Molochians, is how that plays out in Israel, which is to some extent a proxy for the inner core of the controlling nobility families, the black nobility, and the internecine struggle between them. Because remember, there's both Florentine Luciferian and Venetian Molochian. And again, there's some scattering difference of where some from Florence might be Molochian, some from Venetian might be Luciferian. But those families who really have their hands in the lever of power, you can, to a certain degree, glean what's going on with them by watching the internecine conflicts in Israel. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I go over in the Black Nobility series.